Sure. Awesome.
Yep, I can unmute.
And then I will wait to start this slideshow after I toss it to you. Awesome. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining tonight's town hall featuring our Big Red Women's Rowing Program. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Nadia Keachel from Big Red Athletics Alumni Affairs and Development, and I'm gonna hand it over to Coach here soon, but I just wanted to cover a few Zoom logistics. So we're gonna ask that you keep your mics muted throughout the presentation, but we do wanna hear from you. So if you have a question or a comment, you can type it in the chat box. And if you're new to Zoom, to find the chat box, just hover your mouse on the screen and a menu bar will appear at the bottom. You'll see the feature to chat and you can type in your question or your comment. You can send it to me, the host, privately, or you can make it visible to everybody who is on tonight's call. And we would love to have you test out the chat feature now by typing in your name, your class year if you're an alum, and where you are tuning in from. And as Steve said, also feel free to use the chat throughout tonight's presentation because we are gonna take comments and questions as they come in, and then we'll also have a Q&A at the end. We're recording tonight's presentation and we're gonna make it available to anyone who isn't able to join, but we'll also send a link to the recording once it's complete to everybody who registered for tonight's presentation. We also are going to share some poll questions throughout, so we hope that you will participate. We have some fun questions and we would really love to hear from you on those. And lastly, we are going to be showing some photos throughout the presentation. So I'm quickly just going to let you know how to adjust your settings for optimal viewing. First, you're going to want to enter full screen. So if you hover your mouse on the screen in the top right-hand corner, you should see a button that says enter full screen. And then you will also, once I start sharing, you'll see a green bar that says you're viewing Nadia Keachel's screen. There is a view options tab, and if you click on it and select the side-by-side mode, you'll be able to see the PowerPoint slides fully, and then also still be able to see the speakers vertically on the right-hand side of your screen. It'll make more sense once you see the screen share. So we're thrilled. We have the attendees are still coming in, but we're up to 116, which is awesome. We have an all-star lineup of alums from the 1970s to the 2010s, and they're gonna share their rowing experience with us. And you'll also have a chance to hear from our coaches. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our head coach, Steve Coppola. The Italian in me always wants to call it Coppola.
Yeah.
Coppola.
I go both nowadays.
You will forever be Coppola to me, but Coppola, who's completing his first-ish season with our Big Red Women's Rowing Program. Steve?
Thank you. Thanks, Nadia, and welcome everyone. I don't know if you could say this is the end of my first year, or if you could say that it's year 0.5. You know, we'll see how we want to categorize that later on down the road. You know, I thought, you know, for me, this spring, as we kind of shut down and didn't have racing, was all about, you know, learning about the program's history and where we've been. You know, I think it's been awesome, the responses. You know, we really, I think, you know, starting out, you know, we have to say thank you to, you know, everyone who's been so supportive. You know, you can see it's just growing here, you know, over 100 people tuning in tonight to share their stories and chat. So I think that's awesome. So I think we have to first off start out, you know, by saying thank you to the CRA and, you know, Andy and Anita, and obviously our host, you know, Nadia, for, you know, keeping this together. I like it. Thanks for an undefeated season. You know, so thank you to all of you guys. And I want to quickly, I'm going to screw up all the people I have to thank. So I'm just going to say thank you everyone, and hopefully I've covered it. And I want to toss it over to our panelists, and I'll give a brief introduction, but you know, I want to of everyone. So I said in my emails, you know, starting out with Ellen McHugh from 79, Steph Pearson from 86, Kate Ackerman from 94, Kim Russell from 2008, and Margaret Orion here from 2016. Okay, and one of my first experiences this fall with the team was Schwartz Cup, and we came back and I was told, hey, guess what, you're getting a new 8, and the class of 79 was really supportive, and it was really cool to have everyone back, and I got a chance to meet Ellen, and Ellen, when we were getting together and we were dedicating that show, she told some awesome stories from the early days. And, I was just listening, having the team having a chance to see that and them saying, whoa, this is cool. It really dawned on me that, we're the keepers of the history, and we need to make sure that we continue to pass that on. And I know the team found that pretty cool, the stories from the early days. So I thought this would be a great forum. We have some incoming freshmen on the call. We have some current students on the call. Ladies, let's start with Ellen. If you guys could just go around and introduce yourselves, and let's make sure we indoctrinate the young ones. Oh, still muted, Ellen.
There we go. I'll get this. Do you want me just to introduce myself, or do you want to start with questions, Steve? Okay.
No, let's just go around real quick and introduce ourselves, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Okay, I'm Ellen McHugh. I graduated in 79. I started rowing my sophomore year, so I rowed sophomore, junior, and senior year. And I'm going to take this time to also do a shout out to all the women from the 70s and early 80s who are on this call. I think we have about 15 or 16 of you now, which is terrific. And also what's really special is that among the people that are on this call are the handful of women who are truly the founding mothers of the entire program, which started in 73 and 74. And I got a chance to talk with them or email them this past week. And I heard stories that I never knew. So I'll be sharing some of those too.
Good.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Maxwell Pearson. I'm class of 86. I have to say, Ellen, we had a slight meeting or a little meeting before this meeting today, and I was fascinated by some of the stories you were saying in the 70s, and I'm only 10 years later. So thank you for leading the team here, so to speak. It's an honor to be here today. It's been a while since I've been back involved with Cornell rowing, and I look forward to changing that.
Kate, you're up.
I'm Kate Ackerman. I started rowing my freshman year. I think we're going to talk about how we all stumbled into when we got there. Finished up in 94, and I remember Stephanie Maxwell Pearson was our absolute idol. She was the Olympian that we all aspired to being, so it's so cool to be on a panel with her. And look forward to walking down memory lane. We have some of our old teammates and classmates on the call tonight.
I am Kim Russell from the class of 2008. It's awesome to be here and to see all these faces from the Cornell rowing family. It's been fun taking a walk down memory lane the last couple of days, just reflecting on the time on the hill. Just the best. So I'm excited to be here and to be on this panel and talk to all of you.
Hey everybody, I'm Margaret Ryan. I graduated in the class of 2016. I'm also super honored to be on this panel, and I'm so happy to see everybody tonight.
Awesome. All right. So so I want to jump into it, right? And I want to start with the first question I thought to ask you all was, how did you get recruited to row at Cornell? And I know as we've gone through the years, the definition of recruited has evolved. So that's why I'm specifically asking that. So Alan, if you could if you could take us off, and I think we're going to keep an eye on the chat box too for some people. I'm sure there's some other interesting experiences. So.
Hey, so when Steve was pushing this question before, I said recruited. I didn't get recruited. Nobody I knew got recruited. But then I thought about it, and I kind of did. So how I got involved with crew is I literally bumped into an old wooden Pocock 8 that was stationed in the middle of the Arts Quad in fall of '77 as part of some kind of back to school fall festival where activities were all out there. And I did get recruited, because how I got involved was this wonderful group of really friendly, warm, welcoming, enthusiastic, funny women who were around this shell. I had never heard the word crew before. I had no idea what it was about. And they were like, this is so much fun. Why don't you join us? You don't need to have any experience. And I thought, well, these seem like fun people. So I joined, and that was how it happened. And I'm going to just give 30 seconds to what came before me, because I think that really was an eye-opener for me. The founding mothers, many of whom are on this call right now, actually started this program in '73, so '73, '74. And it began when 3 freshmen that came from a boat that rode in Philly in the high school, and they had been in an 8 together that won some junior gold medal in the high school, I guess, a competition. And they got to Cornell, and there was no women's crew. And they said, well, we've got to change that. We're going to start one. Literally, this is how it started. So they start talking it up to their friends. And that's, at one point, someone put an ad in the Cornell Daily Sun, because one of the women that contacted me this week said, that's how I got recruited. There was an ad. Want to learn how to row? No experience needed. Call this number. So it really just grew organically from that. People talking to each other in dorms and sororities and classes. It was kind of a, if you build it, they will come kind of thing, and people did. The first couple of years, they actually weren't even in, on the water. So the first year, they were just land training, running, trying to get into shape. I think they did work out in the tanks. There was a grad student who rowed in Wisco who was their volunteer coach. And after the second year, I think they were finally on the water. There were 2 years when they rowed out of Ithaca College, because there was no room for women in the Cornell boathouse or on the Cornell docks or on the Cornell water. So they rowed 6 a.m. at Ithaca College, and all of them tell stories of this floating dock that they'd have to navigate, sometimes not so successfully, to get their boats in the water at Ithaca College. By the time I showed up in '77, in the fall of '77, the program had really grown. They were competing intercollegiately by then. They had 2 volunteer coaches, Bill Doherty and Stan Worth, who the names are probably familiar to all of you, because there's a Bill Doherty and Stan Worth award that's been given every year since '79 and '80 that hang on the walls of the boathouse. And that we were at that point rowing out of the Cornell boathouse. So that was how recruitment went back in the day.
Nice. Stephanie, how about you? Did you row in high school, or how did you get suckered into coming down to the boathouse?
I did not row in high school, but I was recruited, I have to tell you. I was in Barton Hall signing up for a physical education class. I think I was going to pick squash, and this tall woman came up to me, and I want to say it was Laura Neville, because she was over 6 foot, and she said, "Hey, you want to row?" And I thought, okay, she's looking because I'm athletic and whatnot. And it, as many of us got recruited in the '80s, it was because we were tall. I later found out that everyone over 5'7" was approached. They were told, oh, you would be good at that. The first introduction meeting that I went to, there was over 150 of us. I was overwhelmed. I knew nothing about rowing. I went home, I called my dad, and I'm like, Dad, do you know anything about rowing? And he says, oh, I think it's those really long boats that row on the Raritan, because we live in New Jersey, close to Rutgers. And I'm like, what do I have to lose? Let me give it a try. And the opportunities and the friends that I've made, I thank that day that I was recruited.
Nice. Kate, what was your memories of the recruiting process?
I absolutely wasn't recruited. Came to Cornell because I was smart like the rest of you. And I tried out for 2 a cappella groups, and it came down to 4 people both times, and they took 2, and I was not one of them either time. So I decided I couldn't sing anymore, even though I did musical theater in high school. And I lived with a bunch of people in Bolt Hall who actually were on the men's lightweight team. And they said, you should go down to the boathouse and just check it out. There's no cuts. Like, what do you got to lose? Just like Stephanie. So Anita's husband, John Brenner, was our coach. And yeah, there were no cuts. He just worked with us. And I was always 7 or bow. So short people have a space on the team.
For me, I wanted to play a sport in college when I was in high school, and I didn't row. We didn't have rowing where I grew up. But I was really into cross country, and I wanted to go out for the cross country team and see if I could walk on. But as I got closer to college, I just figured I probably wasn't fast enough to actually make the D1 cross country team at a school like Cornell. And so I was on the Cornell website looking at other sports, and I was like, how about rowing? So I reached out to the coach before I got to campus, and she was like, yeah, come see me when you get there. We had the swim test, and at the end of the lane, there were a couple of gorgeous, tall women. And when I got out of the pool, they were like, hey, do you want to come out for rowing? I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I'm coming down. And I figured there was no way I was going to make the team. I was like, I'm just going to try this. We'll see what happens. I'm going to do my best. But yeah, long story short, it was, I made the team. Just about everybody made the team that that went down that year. But I remember, like one of our first practices freshman year, getting out of the boat, stepping onto the dock, and just looking around at the girls and thinking, a lot of these girls are probably going to be like my best friends for life. And fast forward, it's totally true.
Nice. All right, Margareta, top those stories.
I don't think I can top those, but my story was definitely a fairly traditional recruiting story. I rowed in high school. I want to say I filled out maybe the recruiting questionnaire that was on the website, and then had several phone calls with Liz, visited the campus, and things just took off from there.
Nice. So as we go, we start getting into the more traditional recruiting process. Now, once we did get to campus, and I want actually, before I get into this, Nadia, do you want to let's start the slideshow so that we can maybe kick some memories down. And I will say Kate sent me some action shots from her years, so those will probably be at the end of the slideshow. We want to start this first with Ellen. How did you guys get to the boathouse from campus?
We ran uphill both ways. No, we ran. And I remember we would meet up at Crew Corner. I don't know I think it was like University and Stewart intersection, and just start heading down. And we ran down Gun Shop Hill and through some streets in Ithaca, and then Meadow Street, and crossed and turned over on the railroad tracks. And since we had to be on the water in our seat already, ready to row by 6, most of the mornings when we ran down there, I remember it being dark. It was very dark. And the other challenge was to get back from there to 8 o'clock classes. There were a few people, as I recall, that had cars. And if you were really desperate, you'd get stuffed in a car to be able to get back in time. But I had an 8 o'clock German class, I remember, and I don't think anybody wanted to sit next to me in that entire semester in that German class. I always came in stinking and wet. But yeah, so we ran down and back, and it was great because you got a chance to meet people, and I still can remember the people that I used to, run down and back with. It was fun, and it was a little bit of a workout. So.
Oh.
Yeah,
Steph,
for me, it was very similar. You would meet at the corner. I didn't know the street names, but Ellen, you do it good by your memory. And normally I would run down, but we slowly learned who had the car and how to get back. So often someone would pick you up, you would jam in a car or possibly even sit in a trunk just to get up the hill where they would drop you off. But yes, everyone was willing to have a clown car, so to speak.
Kate?
Yeah, we ran or we went in my 1980 Malibu Classic silver station wagon that we called the Silver Bullet. The brakes didn't work that well, so you really had to start slowing down at the end of the road as you wheeled on into the boathouse. But otherwise, we ran up and down the hill.
I saw that picture. I was actually Nadia. This is I updated the PowerPoint, but I guess you had already pulled it onto your computer from the shared drive. I updated it with Kate's photo, and I actually I captioned that photo and said that's every coach's nightmare, is like the amount of rust that was on that car.
I can pull it.
That was yeah, that was there's a few women. I think I saw Carrie is here. She's one of our seniors. She has I've offered to help her with auto maintenance because I've been scared, because I think her car is also from 1980. So it just keeps running.
I'll pull the new one while you're
okay.
continuing.
Kim, what about you?
We started off with most people running down to the boathouse. A couple of us would run back up to campus, but as the years went on, more and more people would pile into the cars. So definitely the clown car situation. Lots of illegal piling in the back seats.
Anita's on the call.
Yeah.
Margaretta, was it still carpooling?
It definitely was carpooling when I was there. Our manager, Becca Catalana, who's amazing, would make these elaborate carpool systems and would like track down everybody's schedule and made sure that everybody had a ride. So we were all, you had the option to run, and some people took that option, but I remember a very elaborate system to ensure everybody had a seatbelt to get down to the boathouse.
So that brings me to the next follow-up question. What song did you have to hear on the radio going down? Those of you that did drive, what song did you have to hear on the radio coming down the hill?
Well, I guess I must have just sung in my head
or Ellen, if you were running, I think the follow-up would be also like, what, it doesn't have to be radio actually, even with workouts, like for the land workouts, what did we need to hear on the radio, whether going to the boathouse or or in the car on the way down?
I thought about this question after you put it out there, and honestly, I guess maybe I'd be interested to see what other women my age remember. I don't remember. We made our own soundtrack. We carried it with us, and it was just a lot of talking. What I remember is just the constant talking and chatter with each other. And there wasn't a lot of music going on. There was no music when you did your erg piece, or that you were in the tanks, or that you ran. You just talked and talked and talked, unless you were too exhausted to talk. And that's what I remember. The only musical thing I remember quite dearly and quite clearly is I remember sitting in the boat in the very early morning, because very often, it would be sunrise when we were out there. And there would be this whistling coming. This beautiful whistling coming, and it was usually some kind of classical music, and it was always from in the bow where Ellie Doris sat. She was a beautiful flute player. She lived in Wesley Hall, very very musical, artistic woman, great friend even to today. And she used to whistle these beautiful tunes. And I can remember sitting there in the morning and listening to Ellie do her whistling.
Nice.
For me, I mean, back in the 80s, you didn't really have the Spotify to be able to make your playlists. And so it wasn't so easy to, tune in to different music. And of course you had the cassette tapes and all the rest. It was a little bit more challenging. I guess if I was challenged to pick something, Journey was big back then. Don't Stop Believing or Any Way You Want It. But I think more so what I remember is when you go into Teagle Hall, it was just so crowded with so much activity, and ergs were going and the gamuts were going and the tanks were going, that I don't even remember really listening to anything. So that's kind of my experience. It's different than the Spotify. I have 3 kids and they have more playlists than they know what to do with.
So since I noticed that John Brenner joined Anita, I do have to say that freshman year we came up with a song to Cecilia by Simon and Garfunkel. There's my car. It was in great. And so we came up with this song, John Brenner, you're breaking my heart, you're shaking my confidence daily. We had like a whole lyrics for the Cecilia song. And then whenever we went on trips and we were basically in the bus, we would definitely listen to Carly Simon, Let the River Run.
And music was a big deal for our years. Lots of playlists. The playlists for erg tests were very important, key. We listened to a lot of country. Besides country, like Tim McGraw. I also, one song that stands out was Apple Bottom Jeans, not country. And then the last song that stands out from a lot of erg tests was, I think, one of Hillary Gaiman's favorites, Eminem, Lose Yourself.
Okay, it's a good throwback. Margareta, what do you got?
For me, the song that comes to mind, and I feel very fortunate to have been a rower in 2016 because it coincided with when Beyonce came out with her song Formation. I remember it was like a phenomenon across all the teams. Like you would go to different boat houses and like the boats would be in huddles, like listening to Beyonce's Formation. And it was like, it's an amazing song. And, I highly recommend giving it a spin if you haven't heard it. But I remember that was a very big, like, hype song for our team.
Nice. That's awesome. I think it definitely, like, keep throwing them out there in the chat as well to our participants, because I will pass those song recommendations on to the team, and maybe we'll have a few throwback workouts. I think we're moving along, but I want to save some time, so I want to keep it with the rowing stuff. What kind of land workouts do you remember? What was your coaches or land workout of choice at the time, or what was like the land torture method that you remember the most?
Well, this I can probably be pretty accurate on, because believe it or not, I kept a scrapbook. I don't even have a wedding album, and none of my kids' pictures, but I have a scrapbook from 40 years ago where I actually have pieces of paper where the schedule was written on it. So it was running, and more running. So at some point we started doing the ergometer once a week, though in the beginning it clearly wasn't that often. And you have to remember, an ergometer at that point consisted of 2 machines. There was 1 starboard and 1 port that were in Teagle. That was it. That was for all 3 teams. And in fact, they're still there. If you look in the corner of Teagle, you'll still see them there. I can point them out to you. Anyway. And so you'd have to sign up. I mean, you'd have your time slot, and you'd have to sign up at your time slot. And as Stephanie remembers, the place was always just a huddle of activity. I mean, there was all these people there, and there was no music going on, but there was a long line behind you when you were on the erg, so you could always count on people cheering you on and giving you words of encouragement and all that. So that happened about once a week. We were in the tanks in the wintertime about twice a week. And then there was weights about twice. So, but let me tell you what weights were. So this was before there were any weights that women could do. So weights consisted of homemade weights that were made by Bill and Stan, our coaches, that consisted of lead pipes and some kind of cans filled with cement. And we would hide out in the boiler room. Now I remember Teagle, but some of the women remember Helen Newman, but we were in some basement boiler room somewhere. And that's where we would do our weights. And somehow, I think between when I started and my senior year, we had a Nautilus, because I have pictures of us on the Nautilus. So we evolved from hiding out with lead pipes to the Nautilus by senior year. And that was twice a week. And then on Saturdays, it would be the fun day. And the fun days sometimes were things like playing soccer together. Sometimes they were cross-country skiing. My senior year, our coach bought everybody, I mean, we paid a little bit, but this cross-country ski set, and I had never skied before and was not very enthralled in the beginning, but learned to love it. So we could do that. Or we would do stadiums. You could do the stadiums up and down, or you could do the crescent in the back. Those were pretty popular. Or you could do repeat hills. I remember doing Buffalo Streets and William Street, though some of the other women remember doing repetitive Seneca Streets and State Streets. So, and then every single day, no matter what else you did, whether you did weights or tanks, whatever, you always had a run as well. So there'd be one long run a week, which would be like 6 to 8 miles. And then the other days, it would be like 3 to 5 miles that you'd somehow do before or after weights or before or after tanks. And those runs that I remember always went out the same way. You go out 366 and you'd either go down Forest Home, or you do Game Farm, or you do, I think there was a Turkey Hill, and there was a Freeze Road, and there was a Honest Lane, or whatever. I just remember, I did a lot of running. And you talked, you ran with people and you just talked the whole time.
There you go.
So Ellen, I remember those, I'm going to refer to them as blue ergs, the gamut ergs. I don't know, do they still exist in Teagle Hall, or?
They're in the corner somewhere. At least they were last year when I was last up there.
But we were upgraded a little, because then we had the concept too, ergometers in the middle between the two tanks. So we had a little bit more option. We would sign up for the gamut ergs. And I do remember those were being tortured because, you know, Tony Johnson, I remember freshman year, making you pin a number and that's what you needed to get. So those were torturous workouts. But I think one of my, I don't want to say favorites, but one that I remember are the windshield wipers, running up the stairs, running down, running up the next, running down, and then going over the crescent. And how many windshield wipers did you need to do? But I appreciate all your runs you noted too, because I wouldn't have remembered those Turkey Hill and whatnot. But yeah, we would have a jackrabbit go out, and it usually was Maureen Murphy Anderson, and we would have to chase her. She was a phenomenal runner, and I was not one of the better runners. So yeah, a lot of running. Towards the end of my time at Cornell, we slowly got more weights, and I remember them being put in a corner at Teagle. So we would try to cross train between the winter, traditional winter on the erg or the tank with weights.
So Maureen is still a phenomenal runner. So she was your time. I didn't know her till I was an alum, and I still do alumni races with her. And she goes and does 100-mile runs, and she's doing marathons all the time and Ironman all the time, and just is still a beast.
Her nickname is Mad Dog back then.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
I've been pair partners before with her because we're both short. She's just like this little feisty thing in the bow seat, or in two. So I remember taking wine senior year, which I assume is still there as part of the hotel school. And so that is basically a rite of passage that you take the wines course, that's world renowned, and you get to sample wine. But unfortunately, those of us who were on the team couldn't really drink much wine, because then right after the wines class, we would have to go and run either the towers at Teagle, or we'd have to run stadiums. And so nobody really wanted to drink too much wine. Everybody else would go off and carry it into College Town and make it a happy hour for the evening, but the rowers couldn't pull that off. So we were the losers that would spit it into the cup and would just taste it. Definitely remember the gamuts, definitely remember the numbers that we had to hit on the gamut ergs, and for sure the runs. There were some people that could outrun John Dunn. There were maybe 2 of them, and they would race, and then the rest of us would be kind of picking up the pack. Jody Sanford is on this call with me. Sanford Sweeney now, and she and I were not gifted in the running department, so we would race each other to just not be last. I eventually became a good rower, but I sound like I'm pretty pathetic right now. History.
So Ellen mentioned cross country, and I had forgotten about a memorable cross country workout that we did, I think my freshman year. So we did that. I don't know why we didn't do it again after that, but but that was a lot of fun. A couple other memorable land workouts that come to mind. One was a wall sit competition. So after we lifted, we all lined up on the wall and just sat for as long as we could. And a couple of us made it to like 45 minutes, and it was so brutal, but very memorable. Another memorable one was, so we were in, the boathouse was renovated after my year graduated, and we were on campus in the years when I think the coaches were really making a strong campaign to get the boathouse renovation going. And my class ended up doing a lot of body circuits in the men's locker room down at the boathouse, because the men's locker room took up the entire second floor of the boathouse. So when we were down at the boathouse, just the women's team, that was like, you know, prime real estate to be able to do some body circuits. I remember doing like tricep dips on the disgusting benches in the men's locker room. Couple more I'll mention. So one memorable workout was our first erg test ever, freshman year, our first 2K. We were in the tank room, crammed in there, and Hillary Gaiman, I think to lighten the mood, decided to tell us a joke like right before our first our first pull of the erg. So she told us, I remember this, a guy walks into his psychiatrist wearing only saran wrap, and his doctor says, "Clearly, I can see your nuts." And then we take our first stroke to Eminem, probably. And lastly, I think my senior year was the first year the team did the Valentine's Day Massacre. So I'm pretty sure that was 2008.
We're not allowed to say massacre anymore. It's the Valentine's extravaganza.
Yeah.
Margaretta?
We definitely had the Valentine's Day event pre-name shift, so that's spanned my era for sure. We also we incorporated the gamut a little bit in the winter, so we kept that legacy alive. We lifted weights too, and there were plenty of erg workouts. I think a lot of people would agree with me that the most sort of notorious land workout was our 1500 series. Every Wednesday we would go into the slider room and be partnered up with one of our teammates, and we would do 1500 meter pieces in sort of like a relay style. It would be increasing the number of pieces week over week up to 5. And the 5, it just was like that was like the focus, or at least for me, that was definitely the focus of the winter. We also did like some fun workouts too. Like we would do something called album workouts, where the coaches would just put on an album, and we would do, I forget specifically what the intervals were, but we would do intervals from the start of the album to the end of the album. And I think we did like Aerosmith and Will Smith, and maybe like independently Taylor Swift's Red. And you just didn't really know when the workout was going to end unless you were like deeply familiar with the album. So that was a very creative way to stave off the winter blues.
Nice. So I'm watching the chat box, and I'm remembering that I forgot a question. I guess it's actually probably a good point, because if we follow the season from the land workouts, we went to winter break training. So if you ladies could tell us all, what did you guys do for your winter training trip?
Oh, you mean spring break?
Or spring break? Now we do it over winter break.
Oh,
But
okay.
I guess, where did your training trip take place?
So before I started, the women that rode before me said that in the spring of '76, they remember staying in Ithaca, but it was like being on a trip because none of the men were there. And at that point, they weren't allowed to row out of Cornell. So they got to row out of the Cornell boathouse using the Cornell docks. Imagine that. By the time '77 rolled around, so spring of '77 and spring of '78, as I remember, both those years, we went down to UVA. And what we all remember from that is red clay everywhere. We didn't have any buses, obviously, so we car caravan to every place, races, including spring break. So you would just figure out who you could stuff into what cars. I came across a little note that told us what to bring. You had to give $1 to your driver. Everybody had to keep the gas receipts because that would be reimbursed. And then you had to bring $30, which we put in a kitty. And then we do these massive grocery shoppings. And we'd stay in this, I think it was a church or a community center that had a big basement. So we all could sleep on the floor with our sleeping bags in this one room, and it had a kitchenette. And so we would cook these massive amounts of spaghetti and chili at night, and that's how we ate. And we all remember massive amounts of ice cream afterwards with every topping you can imagine. And there were two times a day, the standard 2 times a day workouts when we were there. So that's what I remember. And we did have a trip. We took a little trip to Monticello when we were there, one of those trips. I remember that. But we had a great time. It was a lot of fun.
Steph, how about you guys?
So we had really good time. We went to Tampa. I want to say 3 out of my 4 years. And 1 year we went on the East Coast, and we went through the intercoastal thing. So we were either rowing 8s next to these big tankers, or we were in small boats dodging manatee. But I just really fond memories of, 4 of us in a hotel room, needless to say, with all our dirty laundry. I do remember making pyramids of beer cans after a night of celebrating with everybody. So it was a good combination between training, bonding with your team, really getting to know your team, and getting ready to start your season. So fond memories of winter training.
Cool.
So every winter we went to Cocoa Beach, Florida, home of Ron John's Surf Shop, which was open 24 hours a day, which we thought was exciting. And that was literally every winter trip, and we went with the lightweight men. And then in the spring, it really depended on what was going on with the river. So I think Jody mentioned, and I'd sent some pictures, they weren't super exciting, but basically 1 year we had to go to Princeton for the spring, and we would do these practices and not have a place to go in the middle of the day before we had our second practice. So we would just hang out at their student center or wherever and just crash on their couches, like total interlopers. And we would wear all our big red gear. I remember going to the bagel shop there because back in the 90s, all we did was eat bagels nonstop, load. And we had convinced the bagel guy to start making big red bagels. So they made those the whole week that we were there, dyed them red, like with strawberries or something, made them pink. And then another time we had, again, frozen water flooding in Ithaca. So we went to Syracuse. We were driving back and forth to Syracuse to get some rowing in as well.
My years, we went someplace different every year. So when I started on the team, I heard these great stories of Cocoa Beach and was like, wow, that sounds great. But freshman year, we ended up going down to New Orleans and rode on the bayou, which was interesting. It was like middle of nowhere, but we had a fun evening drive into New Orleans one night. The following year, we went to Sarasota, which was great. But like the only thing I remember from that trip was having to carry the heaviest launch boat in the world into the water every practice, which was not fun. And then the third year we went to Austin, Texas, where we ended up having, it was like a freak ice storm. So the trip got cut in half because of the ice, and nobody was prepared for that. I remember I was wearing socks on my hands just to stay warm, trying to take the boats apart. And the final year we went outside of Orlando and established the training trips in Camp Ithiel.
So for when I was there, I went to Camp Ithiel for all 4 years. I really loved Camp Ithiel. It's essentially a I believe religious like retreat or campsite. And we would go with the men's teams, and we'd all be in bunks and sleeping on these like very thin mattresses, and we'd all eat together, and you would run to practice and bike to practice, or I guess take the van was the third option. And it was about 2 miles away, and there were all these series of lakes that were all connected by these cuts, and you'd sometimes have to like pull your oar in to like not hit the bridge, and it was very adventurous. So I think I was one of the last years to go to Camp Ithiel, but I definitely have extremely fond memories of it.
Yeah, cool. So we were lucky this year. So no spring. I kind of rolled the dice on it. No spring break trip, but we were on the water February 4th, I think was our first day on the water this year. So probably contrary to most of all of your memories. And I think Todd was saying he was kind of bummed that he didn't have to wade in at Taganic Park to try to row. So I want to shift gears and get into some racing memories. And I might wind up cutting a few, like one question short, just because we're running short on time, or so I don't want to take too long. Nadia, if we could throw up the poll, so that'll actually cover a couple of the questions I wanted to ask, and we can get everyone. And while we throw up the poll, if we could start with Ellen, would you mind sharing with us who made your first boat?
Well, we didn't have any of our own boats. So for the first couple of years, it was all hand-me-down boats for the men. And they were just their cast-off wooden old pocock boats. I think we got our first boat in '75. It was some big fiberglass boat called the Spike and Roby. And the Roby came from the Mr. and Mrs. Robeson, who donated the money for that boat. And they're the same Robesons who donated the money for the women's boathouse. So in 1979, the fall of 1979 was when the Doris Robeson boathouse, which now I think you guys just use for storage, but that was the first women's boathouse. So that was the first time. I remember coming back for the dedication because I graduated that spring and it didn't open until the fall. But I can remember it because I remember just being so happy and proud that the women had showers and a place to go. It was so wonderful. And then we had a boat given by, in the spring of '79, we had another boat that was our own, given by a donation of Mrs. Helen Wing, who was the class of 1927. And she rowed, because way back then, there were women that they rowed recreational intramural rowing on BB Lake. And so God bless Mrs. Wing, she donated money to give us a very nice 8-shell in the spring of '79. And that was named, that's the Bill Doherty. I don't know if it's even in the boathouse anymore. That was named after our original volunteer coach, who was so wonderful those first couple of years, who unfortunately was killed very tragically in a car accident that spring, in the spring of our senior year. So our boats were pretty rickety, but when we got our own boat in '79, and it was like, wow. So.
I went back and had to look because I didn't know. And so I remember some sort of fiberglass boat, whatever, but I went back and looked at some pictures, and my senior year, actually my junior year, we were in an empacher. So we had come a long way, Ellen, from your time and the different years. So I do remember, not knowing much about boats at all, but I remember freshman and sophomore year thinking, oh, look at that nice yellow boat. And so I was surprised to see those pictures. I'm shocked I didn't remember. I do remember, though, towards my junior and senior year, we got a lot of smaller boats as well and did a lot of cross training with some small boats, and I thought really complemented the program. And that is obviously through some great donations from people to be able to get into a pair or four. It complemented your spring season in the 8.
So I had to look through pictures too, because the only thing I could think of was how excited we were when we got a red Dorigo. And I don't even know whatever happened to Dorigos, but man, we thought that was cool because it was red. I don't know how successful we were in it. And then we had definitely some hand-me-down empackers that had seen better days. And we definitely have some pictures. I think some of the ones that you threw up there were of the Spolies that have the red marking on it. So those are the boats. I don't remember a lot about the other equipment. I can't believe all the stuff that Ellen is coming up with. She's got a very good memory.
No, it's just because everybody, I've been putting it out this week. Help me, guys, help me remember some stories. This is definitely collective memory.
We rode in, freshman year, we rode in a Resolute, and then after that it was a Hudson, and I think senior year, Vespoli. But I just remember all the boats had stories to them, depending on who dedicated the boats. And whether it was alumni, you always knew that you were rowing in a boat that that had a story behind it and meaning. And just feeling the community and alumni group, the people that came before you when you were on the water was a pretty special feeling. Additionally, our Hudson was also a red boat. That had a pretty special story. I remember we dedicated, or that boat was christened at the head of the Charles, I think when I was a freshman or sophomore. It was called the Stevator, and it was in honor of one of our teammates. Her father had passed away while rowing on the Charles, and she had raised money, I think, for that boat. So we rode in that boat. It was very hard to set, but we had a lot of good times in it.
Margareta, what do you remember?
I believe we started with red Vespolis, and then my senior year, our varsity was a Hudson, and it was named after Elizabeth Garrett, our late president, who I believe was the first female president of Cornell, and we were all very proud to row that shell.
That one's still there. That's actually what we wound up racing at the head of the Charles this year. Mostly because I couldn't decide whether to have it starboard or port, so I had one starboard, one port, and the team thought I had some grandmaster plan, but it was really I picked the Garrett for the starboard one, and that's the one we wound up racing. Cool. Do you guys remember what was your most memorable race? And now I'm gonna qualify that for everyone. It doesn't necessarily have to be a victory. If I threw out there when we were talking about the Class of '75 Cup, the swamping event or near swamping, when we had to cut half the races short on the Charles because the wind was too much, and it was all floating starts. Let's throw it out there. What's your most memorable racing experience? Ellen, what do you remember?
This is such an individual thing, isn't it? No, really, it is. It's very. I know for me specifically, but it'll be different for everybody, I'm sure. So we did not have very successful rowing, at least the boats that I was in when I was there. And my senior year, we had the very, 79 was a good year because we got the boathouse, and then we got a shell, and then we got a full-time paid coach. But she decided, Sharon Vassia, she decided going into the Eastern Sprints that since we weren't going to be very competitive, I guess, in an 8, to divide us up into 4s. And so we, myself and 2 other seniors, and anyway, we put in a 4, and we had rowed together for a long time, and we did great. We won our race in the varsity 4-8, and it was just so great. It was great for so many reasons, but you know, it was mostly seniors in the boat, and it was just a really great way of ending a Cornell career. So I very, very clearly remember that race.
I mean, I have a couple that are very, very memorable to me, but I guess the one I'd like to share is a freshman year at Lake Warramug. We were really a good crew, and we went to, start, and lo and behold, we did not make the grand finals. We only made the petites, and we were, first big race. Isn't this wonderful? Tony Johnson was our coach, and he came up to us and gave us a talk after the race and getting us ready for the petite finals. We didn't know any better, but I do remember the story he tells us. I think he was really teaching us, we needed to take the next level. And he basically said to us, you rowed like your rowing skills were like my grandmother. And we're thinking, what do you mean like your grandmother? Well, and she's been dead for 10 years. And it really got us thinking about focusing and not just taking things for granted. And I think it allowed our crew to really grow, not just that season, but in future seasons. We had another similar experience our senior year, where we had the bad lane, so to speak, 7th lane added, and just didn't perform to our potential. And so that also remembers too. I think John Dunn and Tony Johnson really had some really great ways, if although we may have not made it to the place we wanted to be, but how to never give up and go to the next level. The other thing that I remember so fondly from my years at Cornell were the after parent parties and tailgates. Our families got together. We had tables, we had tablecloths, we had flowers, we had food. It was a family gathering, and I think that's not at one race, but that was really something I truly remember and cherish.
Kim?
There's so many,
yeah.
and would you call me Karen? Okay.
No, I thought I was looking at Kim's face, so I went and called Kim. Sorry, Kim.
So I did go into alumni list and ask people about different favorite races or fond or scary memories. For me, I remember we went to Princeton, and I'm sick of talking about Princeton on this call, but they were much faster. They were sort of the crew to beat in our time. And John Dunn knew we didn't have a chance in hell to beat them. And so he basically went to give us our pep talk, and he said, so here's the race plan. We were expecting something profound. He was going to come up with something really good. And he said, so I want you guys to start out as high as possible and race as hard as you can from the start, and then don't ever stop. We're like, seriously? He's like, yeah, just go for it and just hold on tight, and we're going to see what happens. And we're like, oh, crap. So we did that. He told us that from the varsity, JV, 3V, the whole group. He told us all the same race plan. And it worked for the JV, and they actually won. And like nobody saw it coming. The JV pulled it off. The varsity, we tried it, and then we just flew and died. But I just loved his approach. He was like, it's the only way we got a chance for any of you to make it. I think with some of the other, a lot of it was the weather conditions. Certainly Dartmouth had really fast water. And so there was a race where we basically kept waiting for the water to like get us lined up, and they just couldn't figure out how we were going to start. So we sort of float down the river for 500 meters before we even got going. Definitely swamping at Brown because those conditions were always horrible. So just a lot of different weather conditions, often determining our fate is part of it.
Yeah, for us, a lot of races I wish not to remember, but certainly I think the best memory I have is freshman year, actually racing on the Charles against Princeton and Radcliffe, and coming out of the bridge and being ahead, and just like the rush of adrenaline, and just picking up and winning that race was amazing. And then to Stephanie's point, I had something that was very special about our class, and especially senior year, was the parents. And after our races, especially our home races back in Ithaca, the parents would come back to our house. We lived, I want to say there's still rowers in the house that my class lived in on North Quarry Street. But the parents would come back there. We had a grill on the deck, the porch out front, and we would just have a great time. The parents all bonded. That was one of the saddest things about graduating, was all the parents were like, wow, we're never going to see each other again. But it's awesome to look back at that time and just think about the true family gatherings.
My most memorable race story is actually the same cup that Kim mentioned, the race against Radcliffe and Princeton. My sophomore year in the varsity, we were down on all of the boats for the first half of the race. And in the last, I think it was like last 400 meters, we just walked through Radcliffe, and there's a really cool video of the race, and it's like the Radcliffe commentators are sort of like realizing what's happening, and it was just a very exciting victory for everybody, and it's also a very cool video to watch that now.
Nice. I would say, Kate, to your memory, I call that the Better Off Dead race plan. If you remember the John Cusack movie, there's a scene there when he's getting ready to ski down the hill, and his coach looks at him and he says, "Here's the plan. Go that way really fast. If something gets in your way, turn." So that's my version. That's my version. All right, awesome. So I want to, last question of the night. We're gonna before we open it up to some before we unmute everyone again. How did you guys stay involved, or did you stay involved afterwards, or how did obviously I found you, so you've stayed involved a little bit, but how have you stayed involved in rowing since leaving Cornell?
Mute myself. I just want to make a quick comment about, people were talking about family generosity. It wasn't really a thing back then for parents to come to your races, but one of the things that we were totally dependent on families and friends for was places to stay when we went to race, because we had no place to stay. So you basically would sleep on the floor of somebody's living room, and you always came through. Somebody always came through for you, So how did I stay involved? I didn't. When I left Cornell, I had some fantasies of maybe being able to row afterwards. I went to Syracuse for med school, and it just never happened. But then in '86, which was 7 years after I graduated from college, I got married. My husband was a lightweight and rowed the same time I did. There were a lot of crew couples back then. We got married in Ithaca at Sage Chapel, and when we were going through our list of invites, we realized, oh my God, we got enough for a men and women's 8 here, So that morning, that was the first time I touched an oar since my senior year in college. But the morning that we got married at Sage Chapel in the afternoon, we put together a women and men's 8 to go out rowing in the morning as part of our wedding celebration. So that was and then my youngest son just graduated in, when did he graduate? 2016. And he was a walk-on and rowed in the heavies for 4 years. And we don't live too far from Ithaca. So when he started rowing, we obviously started going to watch all his races. And that's really how we engaged with the program as alums. So.
So after I graduated from Cornell, I made the decision to move to Boston. And at the time, if you wanted to continue to row in the mid 80s, you either went to Seattle, Washington, or Boston. And the year before I graduated, I was fortunate enough to go to one of the development camps. Never made the team, but it was an opportunity to get to know players, the older women that rowed in the 80 and 84 Olympics. And so it was a really great opportunity to then move to Boston and join that group. I was fortunate to be able to row at the Boston Rowing Center for probably 10 years, and to be able to compete internationally in different arenas. So I was very fortunate to be able to be such a newbie at Cornell and gain so many different experiences from the coaching staff and just the experience at Cornell, that it opened up other doors for me to be able to continue and have success on the international level. So I was very fortunate.
Stephanie is being very humble. She is a 1992 Olympian. I think we can mention that. She didn't just dabble internationally. She was very impressive. And like I said earlier, we thought it was amazing that she came out of our boathouse. I think because I didn't peak in college, and because I discovered rowing in college, like Stephanie, I wanted to see where I could take it. And so I went to pre-elite camp as a lightweight right after our senior year. So I went to Boston for pre-elite camp. I didn't really think through this question to think of all the different places I've rowed since then. Boston, Austin, Chattanooga, Tennessee, San Diego, depending on where our national team training centers were. But I was on the lightweight women's team. I did not go to the Olympics, but I went to the World Championships. And rowing was one of those things that I just fell in love with in college, and I've never let go of it. I became a doctor. I'm now one of the team doctors for U.S. Rowing. I'm one of the doctors who's on the medical commission for FISA. I am a sports medicine physician and try to stay involved with rowing as much as possible. So travel a lot with the U.S. team, and still row in the BMA Boat Club alumni race that we put together, or that we do at the head of the Charles. So we're not in the alumni category, we're in the old lady category, and we just keep moving up. So it's been a lot of fun, and I still have lifelong friends because of the time I spent at Cornell.
I'm seeing some of the comments here about rowers marrying rowers, and I was one of those. So I married a guy who graduated the year after me. So I was back on campus a lot the year after I graduated, because of rowing, he couldn't visit me in New York very frequently, but I was able to go visit him and, extend my time with Cornell. A few years after I graduated, it may have been the first annual fund dinner in New York City. I got up and gave the young alumni perspective on giving back and the importance of giving back to the program that we love and that helped shape our lives. And, we enjoyed we enjoyed those years so much and got so much out of it. So after that event, I got involved with the CRA, the Cornell Rowing Association Board of Trustees, and I'm the secretary of that board. So it's a great time to go back a couple times a year and hear what's going on with the current programs, the current teams, and just talk about how to make sure that that the program continues to give to future generations going forward.
All right, awesome. Margareta?
Hey, for me, my time at Cornell was definitely like all about my friendships. I'm still incredibly close with everybody who I rowed with in school, and because of that, Cornell rowing has a huge part of my heart, and it was and still is a major part of my identity. I'm definitely somebody who finds the call of the erg to be quite resistible. And so I tried to find I needed to find alternative ways to connect with my with the current team and my experience. So one of those ways was starting a email newsletter called the Feebler Folk Newsletter, which is a very tongue-in-cheek and lighthearted newsletter geared towards the alums and current rowers of Cornell Rowing. And basically it's like a monthly-ish newsletter that covers all of like the fun stuff, or the things that I think are the fun stuff, like the culture of the team, the music and food, slang terms, things like that. And it's been a really great project to connect with the current team, former rowers, and then also to just feel like I'm part of a legacy that spans so many generations. So it's been, the Feebler Folk Newsletter has been a really, really great project.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I think that's kind of how I met Margaretta. Really was one of our rowers. I can't remember if it was one of our rowers or one of the assistant coaches forwarded me an email of Margaretta saying, "Okay, who can be my inside source for next year?" And on the email, I got to read some of the things that she was sharing, and I was like, "This is really well written. Like, can you share more?" That brings me. So we've kind of exhausted the canned questions that I had set for tonight. But before we unmute everyone, I just want to mention a couple things. First of all, if you were getting my email, if you did not hear about the town hall from me, and you didn't receive an email from me, but you would like to be on the alumni list, please, if you can just write me. It's I have one of those fancy Cornell emails. It's just my last name @Cornell. Just write me and we'll add you to the list. Some of I think the panelists did an awesome job poking like the years around them. So if you didn't get, or if you haven't gotten my emails about the cup races, we were featuring the history of the cup races. Please write me so we can update your email addresses and keep you all connected. I think it's been awesome to see so many women here tonight. And also, you can, I think Margaretta threw out her sign up, but you can also, I will be updating, things on our list so that we can, if people are interested in signing up for Margaretta's Young Alumni email newsletter, we can get that contact info over to her as well. It's pretty fun. When I first talked to her on the phone, I told her that she should probably change the name. But then because I don't have the crew song memorized yet. So then she walked me through the crew song, and I decided that it was a perfect name for an alumni newsletter. Because you all should be resting. Awesome. And then, I think Bruce is here somewhere. I was reminded that I should give a shout out to Bruce Rogoff, who's here, who's I don't know if I don't think I have powers to unmute him, but along with Kim, he's also on the CRA board, and so is Sue Potter, who I think I saw her video somewhere, and there's many others. So, I've been really impressed with the stewardship and leadership that some people have shown, but I think ultimately, we want to be a family, we want to be connected. So, you know, like let's keep this going. Let's keep this connection going. All right. Does anyone else, any of the panelists or Nadia, do you have anything else to add? No. All right. So Nadia, why don't we unmute everyone and let the heckling begin.
So I guess I just gave everybody the ability to unmute themselves. So if somebody wants to try it.
No way.
The Brenners.
There we go. Look at that virtual background. It went from the work background to such a fun one.
Hi, Peter Davis. Just a quick John Donne story. Kate telling hers reminded me of it. I am class of 77, lightweight, about 40 pounds ago. And John Donne's first coaching position was the lightweight freshman men, class of 77. And we had a race that spring. I cannot remember who it was against. It was on the inlet. And the conditions were atrocious. And it was windy and just completely rocky. I'm sure you all remember what that could be like, especially as you would come out of the inlet. And we rode terribly. But whoever we were rowing against rode even worse. And we won, and we were kind of pleased with ourselves. Next practice, he talked to us. John was not pleased with us. And he just tore us to shreds. And he said, you can't always expect flat water. He said, sometimes you just have to force the boat down the course and just pull on the stick. And I have always remembered that. And I have realized that those words apply to much that one faces in life, not just rowing.
Well said, Peter. Well said. I saw a lot of smiling faces, I think, remembering some of those gems. Sometimes, I will say, sometimes coaches, you know, tend to speak in tongues, you know, sometimes just like the moment hits us, and you guys as rowers remember some of those gems way better than we as coaches do. Right, Hillary?
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
There we go.
I have one more John Donne story. I think we could fill hours of John Donne stories. But so we were in Cocoa Beach, and John Brenner hadn't successfully taught me how to actually lock on and move the boat at all as a freshman. So John Donne was trying to teach me how to, exactly. So John Donne was trying to teach me how to just stick the oar in the water and then push your leg. And he kept doing it over and over, and he's standing on one leg, and he's in our rooms. This is probably like a violation at this point now in 2020, but he was in our room in Cocoa Beach in our little hotel, and he's trying to show me how you can just push your leg really hard and get your legs down. And he stuck his foot through the wall of the hotel room as he was trying to leg drive. And then, like, he's super tall and kind of awkward, so he's got his leg caught in the wall as we're just kind of laughing at him trying to figure it out. But it made an impression on me about how to really get locked on.
There you go. You figured it out. Awesome. No one else wants to unmute themselves and, you know, make fun of the pictures on the wall behind their friends. Yeah. there's not everyone has the perfect virtual backgrounds. You know, Laura Kringer, you got some kids hanging on you. Just scrolling through, people are turning on. And so, no, but this is awesome. And so we will, I think there have been some questions in the chat, and I've also gotten emails separately about sharing those. So I think give us a day or two. You know, Nadia will have to download the session, but we'll try to put that in something that we can share